want to introduce each of them very quickly so that you know who they are. Right here we have Christian Plagemann. He was one of the founders of the Google VR team and was involved with Project Cardboard very early on. He also worked with Sebastian Brunn on the self-driving car at Stanford, and right now is a director at Udacity working on democratizing and modernizing education. Right next to him, we have Daniella Segal, who is the head of experiences at Meta, which is an augmented reality headset that allows you to manipulate 3D content using your hands. She was responsible for building the first AR app ecosystem with Meta, and now works on building up their brand and also making sure that people have very exciting and wondrous journeys when they're using the Meta headset. We also have Jay Borenstein, who teaches CS here at Stanford with a focus on software engineering, entrepreneurship, and of course, virtual reality. He also founded Integration Appliance in the year 2000, and since then has held a number of exciting roles. Right now, he is working on the Education Modernization Group at Facebook. We also have Timoni West, who works at Unity Labs, which is a group within Unity that focuses on future technologies. So it's a little surprised that she's working on virtual reality projects right now. She has two in particular. One is Editor VR, and the other is a world-building tool called Carte Blanche. There's videos about it online that are pretty cool, so you guys should check that out. We also have Jessica Johnson, who is a Stanford alum. She graduated in 2008 with a BA in English, and since then worked at Google for 7 years on numerous projects, including Google Glass. Now she's working at Linden Lab on Project Sansar. Last and not least, we have our moderator, Nick Ochoa. He's the co-founder of Upload VR, which focuses on making the virtual reality space more successful by building a community around VR experiences and also sharing knowledge about VR. He also was a global VR evangelist for Kaleidoscope VR, and in that role got to travel to 9 different countries to host and produce VR events. Today, he chose that he wanted to be here, which I think is really cool. He could have been in a bunch of different countries or Hawaii or something like that. But he wanted to be here with us, so we're very grateful to have him. So this time, I'll really stop talking, but there's one last thing, which is that I hope you all understand that we're in a really exciting space right now. Virtual reality is just taking off. There's a bunch of students and hobbyists here that are excited to learn, and we also have a bunch of very experienced and excited individuals that we can learn from. So I hope that you all really enjoy this opportunity, and let's thank them for taking time out of their busy schedule to be here with us today with a very warm welcome and a very full round of applause as well.
Audio recording.
One more round of applause for that amazing introduction. So let's jump right in. I want to know for each of you, when did you really start digging in to learning about VR, AR, and where did you start when you did start digging in? Yeah, anybody.
I'll start. For me, it was, I think, December of 2012. I was at Google, and we had an internal competition to see who would get to test the new Glass. And Glass at this time was such a huge thing, and everyone was so excited. And I signed up, and I got to be one of the first 100 people there testing it. And the first time I tried it on, I was just like, holy shit, this is the future. So it's been really exciting to work in that thing.
For me, it was just earlier last year, when a headset finally came out that didn't make me sick, you know? So, but after that, it was like, all right, this is the future, this is happening now. So, been digging it around since then.
Yeah, probably 36 months ago, just a student had a development kit and put it on, and I think the common reaction that people are overwhelmed by how immersive and exciting it was. And I'm pretty convinced that that's going to be a medium where a lot of exciting things take place. So I was pretty excited about it right from the start.
So I tried the Oculus in 2013 and got sick. And then shortly after, we were prototyping in VR when I was at Singularity University, and during my time there, we were visiting Meta, and we tried the first Meta one before Meta launched it, and shortly after I joined the company, it was my first augmented reality experience, and I totally felt like I want to be part of it.
Yeah, pretty similar to me. Like the first DK1 at the time, I think, dev kit that I saw, you could kind of see where all of this is going, but it wasn't that clear. Like we were like cabled up, and the latency was high, and like just orientation tracking. But I think then when at Google, when Cardboard happened, and we were like experimenting with these boxes, and all of a sudden you could see like that very simple means can create such experiences. That's when I got in very deep.
Yeah, mobile VR opened it up for a lot of people, definitely. What do you think right now is the biggest, most serious issue impeding mobile VR reaching a mass consumer market? Is it latency? Is it just access? What's that core issue that you think needs to be solved?
I would say it's standards. I mean, that's what we were pushing for at Google, like very, very hard. Like that's what many of you may have followed the Google I/O Daydream announcement, where like the Daydream platform as a specification and reference implementation of how like a really good low latency VR system on an actual like a platform that has distribution, how it looks like. I think that's the biggest thing. Like everyone in the ecosystem wants to build these amazing devices. You just need to establish the standards, the APIs. You need to show them how it actually works. And then it takes a little bit of time, right, for the next device iterations to actually come out.
I would also add that right now content for mobile VR is not significantly compelling. So I would say my favorite game right now on VR is Land Zen or maybe Bazaar. And both of those people will play them for half an hour and be like, that's cool, but it's not going to make them, throw away their iPhone and like grab an Android Galaxy, right? That's $800. It's as much as buying a high-end HMD right now. So that's a pretty significant barrier.
I will add on that, and that was also my kind of thought, content, and it's almost like when you think about the iPhone, when it launched, it was the apps, it was the messaging, the iTunes, the Safari. We don't have yet this application in VR and AR, and I think that once we have the content that is compelling for people, then we will reach more.
Yeah, and I mean, Daydream's not even out yet, and it's the only mobile headset with a dedicated controller, right? Otherwise, you're just kind of working with some weird Bluetooth controller or game controller.
Or swiping.
Yeah.
Sorry, could you speak up a little bit? Hard to hear you.
Yes, we'll project. What about you, Jay? What do you think is the most serious issue facing mobile
Yeah, I
VR
think
now?
the commodity hardware hasn't gotten to the point where it's affordable for everyone yet. I think that's definitely an issue. And then content, it's very early. Like there's way more we don't know about VR than that we do, and so it's content, cost. Those are the biggest pieces.
Anything to add, Jessica?
I'd echo similar things, but with content, people always talk about having one killer app for a platform. It's either one killer app or enough apps that add enough value that people really switch on to that. And I don't think we've quite seen that threshold. Yeah, the Mario.
And you mentioned like
Maps.
Safari and Messenger, right? Those are more utility-based apps. And right now, it's mostly games, entertainment. There's no utility in the mobile VR headset yet. I want to touch on social because you're working on something interesting, Project Sansar, which is from Linden Lab, the makers of Second Life, and it's a metaverse essentially. But how crucial and do you think social elements are to content and to applications for bringing in more people?
Yeah, so in my estimation, it's absolutely essential. Like we have a lot of great experiences out there, but I think one of the things that will keep you hooked, that keeps you coming back, is that connection. Like I think that's one of the reasons we don't put down our phones, is not just that there's cool stuff we can do on it, but it connects us to the people around us. So I really believe VR needs to get to the point that it's connecting us to the people around us. So a lot of what we're doing at Linden Lab is focusing on not only how we do these platforms, but how do we do it in a social way? How do we all experience it together? What can we do that kind of changes it and really starts hooking people more?
And can you touch on what it means to be social in VR? Because on mobile, it's getting to be really fast, really ephemeral, and VR is none of those things, right? It's much more immersive. You take more time. It's a big commitment to put on that headset. So what does it look like to be social in VR right now?
Absolutely. So for me, it's about kind of being there. And I'm sure you guys saw at some of the demos out there, there's a lot of different ways of kind of attempting to be there. But being able to feel like you can experience something with somebody. You can go to a talk. You can watch something live. A huge part of the experiences that we have every day, we do with people. And it matters that I feel like I'm sitting next to you when I'm having this experience, or we're doing this together. And I think if we just think of VR as something that's isolating people, I don't have a lot of faith in the technology. But when we really think about it as a new way of bringing people together for a new experience, that to me means a lot. And there's, again, 50 different ways you could say you get that. You could say you get that by seeing expressions or seeing avatars as blocks and maybe just hearing them enough. But having something where you can some way touch with people and interact with them, I think is going to be really, really important.
Do the rest of the panelists agree? Do you think it's essential that social be added to content, or not so much?
Well, I would say I think like that's going to happen in the same way that the internet evolved to be with games in the early going. That was the easiest thing to monetize. The same thing's going to happen with VR. Games is driving it forward now, but there will be lots of opportunities to realize business value, social value, all kinds of things through that medium over time, which is why it's so exciting, because that hasn't happened yet, but it's for sure going to happen. So in order for those things to happen, you have to create social mechanisms and ways to interact. So I think it's for sure happening.
I just want to touch about like AR and being social, and I don't know how many of you tried augmented reality headset, but the main difference is that AR headset is transparent, so we can see each other. And then when we talk in social, the entire experience is to collaborate and be able to take and grab. This is what we do because we have hand interactions, but interact with the digital content while having eye contact with people.
It's actually interesting that we had in the entire cardboard project, like one of the most surprising findings, maybe was exactly the social aspect, but not in the way like social VR is being talked about now, which is what everyone thinks about VR is like this isolated, like you're in this thing and you're in your own world. Where we found like what people really loved about cardboard was that it didn't have a head strap and you could just like show it to somebody else, like this sharing, like it kind of gave you the superpower to give somebody else an experience that that person has never had. There was a lot of value transfer and back.
We just piloted it. I was at a VR concert and we didn't have enough cardboard and we shared the cardboard between people. So I started it out.
Yeah, and this sharing, and we didn't anticipate this at all. We kind of randomly discovered that so much, it makes you so happy to make this other person happy. That was an interesting discovery, and I think I totally agree. I think social, like just like sharing VR experiences will be killer. Like they will be key.
It's interesting for me when you talk about the use case of sharing, because I think that really is true. If you're doing it and you're in a VR experience next to somebody, you don't know what they're doing. Like I've seen a lot of people who the first time they try VR, they kind of take it on and off and kind of want to see what the people in the room with them are doing. So finding ways to like reconnect those people, I think is going to be really important. And whether that's through AR or other means, I think it's going to be a key part of getting the technology right.
Yeah. It's interesting, not having a head strap made people more willing to pass it around. It democratized the VR experience. That's really interesting. So you said you just stumbled upon that, or?
No, I mean the 2 months end to end that we had to build cardboard, we spent basically 2 months to debate whether we should have a head strap or not. There was like this VR group that said like no, like VR needs to have a head strap. Like you need to have your hands free and you need to be fully immersed. And there was this other group that said no. Let's try something different and let's make this more accessible and let's not pretend this is a high-end headset, but let's just experiment. And it was just like in trying it and trying it and trying it. And I think I'm pretty sure this will be a theme of today of the discussion is like just trying the stuff out that you don't know. Don't pretend you know, don't read the book and then you know, but trying it out. It was so obvious. It was so obvious after a while. Like basically we tried this with inside, with outside. It was like after a few people, it was so obvious to you that this is the better experience. I mean, especially because the latency at the time was high. Obviously, like the cardboard box is not as comfortable as high-end headsets and what you will want to have later. And this was a pretty fundamental discovery that this actually turns this entire thing into something different. Right?
And I think it's also a question of creating and experiencing. There is something about cardboard that experiencing a scene, it's make it easier because you can move it around and just while creating it, maybe you want something that is more robust.
Yeah, and it doesn't pretend to be something that it isn't. I think that's a huge thing, right? So if there's a big hype machine around like what this thing is, and then you try it out and it doesn't quite deliver, like people are kind of like a bit bummed. Right? And so we worked hard on that, like actually kept the cardboard feel. Right? Another 2 months of these 2 months we spent on discussing whether this should be out of plastic or coated, and we actually in the end opted for like this very simple look that basically keeps the expectations a bit lower.
Yeah, smart move. You touched on creating. I think that's really important. It's still not that easy to create VR content, and the resources aren't really there to make it as accessible as creating mobile or web content. You're working on an editor, and Sansar is a platform for creation as well. I want to ask, like, how's been the process of creating tools for virtual reality, and what tools are we still missing to really make this content ecosystem more rich and get more people in?
One of the most interesting things about working on putting the Unity editor into VR is trying to rethink everything so that it actually works in VR, right? It's easy enough to stick a bunch of panels in virtual reality, but as it turns out, you know, with the type sizes and resolution being what they are, it's a terrible experience. There's no reason anyone would want to use that versus just using the 2D editor. So that's definitely been the biggest challenge, but also the most interesting thing is rethinking all of these common UX patterns and the basics of UI in 2D planes. Like, what does that translate to in 3D? When you don't even have the fidelity of your hands, you're really just sort of working with like big grabby dummy sticks, right? And a limited number of buttons. So, I mean, I think if we can get you doing that faster in 3D than you can do it in 2D, then we're on the right path. So that's always been sort of the defining characteristic of what we're looking for and what is good, putting the editor in VR. Oh, and also multiplayer or like multi-user mode is by far like the #1 most requested feature. So speaking of social, you know, everyone always wants that.
Yeah. You want to experience it with other people.
Yeah, totally. Although you don't even have multiplayer mode in like Unity now. Crazy. Like, we'll give it to you. You bring the land, we'll bring the party.
What about Sansar? What are you guys creating tools on top of it that help make it easier to create?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what we think about is kind of the long tail content. That you're always going to have these big companies that are able to put a lot of resources into this and get like developers, get a whole team, build everything up from scratch. And that's great. And if you can do that, that's great. What interests me and some of the things that really excites me are the people I talk to who say, hey, I want to build a support group for like Alzheimer's. And that's something we actually have today in Second Life. Or we had people saying like, I want to build a meditation app. Or I want to build this crazy thing to help people with cognitive behavioral therapy. That gets me really excited. And those people can afford a developer team. So for us, what we're kind of doing is saying like, okay, how do we make it easy? How do we act like the WordPress of VR and make it really easy for people to actually build those virtual spaces and realize their kind of what they want to do with VR?
So the educators on the panel, Christian, Jay, you have new tools in the toolbox to begin teaching people how to build VR. How do you go about educating someone on creating VR? What's different about it than other platforms?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first difference is right now, for the most part, you're developing in 2 dimensions. You're seeing what you've done. You're going in and out of the environment that you're creating. And so there's a little bit of dissonance between your workflow that doesn't exist in developing in other mediums. So that can be a little bit tricky. It's great that we have some tools that are trying to eliminate that piece. But actually, I think if you do have a user like Unity or Unreal, one of these heavyweight IDEs for developing virtual reality projects, I actually think it's easier to get started and build a Hello World project than, for example, a mobile app. You can do it in a visual way, and so students could get started pretty quickly. I think one of the bigger barriers there is just the rig that you need to run VR. Have it be a good experience. But if you have that, I actually think it is pretty accessible if you've already developed in other ways. Like the tools are pretty good.
Yeah, no, actually, I'm sorry.
No, I just said I seconded.
Yeah, same here. I actually wanted to push back on your question. It's, I think it's actually compared to mobile, it's actually pretty easy to get in.
Yeah.
Download Unity, download Unreal, click away.
Use Unity tutorials, webinars.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And
I mean,
we're
what's-
working on that headset on that part. So.
Sure. And what, I mean, of course, what's really hard is like to get beyond like your initial like just playing around a little bit and then bring it to a really polished state. Like that's hard, right? And that's where the whole industry is still learning what works, what doesn't, and how to communicate that. Right?
So what strategies are you taking to teach that to non-technical people, to technical people, and what's worked and what would you recommend to other educators who want to start teaching VR?
I mean, so far, I mean, I just joined Udacity. Like, what we did at Google a lot, like, we invested very, very heavily on like documentation, SDKs, APIs. Like, we published a design lab, which is like a standalone app that just walks you through in a very visual way, like the biggest pitfalls in design, like acceleration, scale, how does all of that work? Like, basically to teach all of these basic lessons. And that's, I mean, that's the way you have to go, right? Provide a lot of examples, empower as many developers as possible, like build these communities. That's, I mean, what I recommend to people most is actually to join these communities, like join the meetups, just talk to other people, like Rabbit Hole, that's a great place to start too.
Yeah, and I would say do it. Like, you need to be building something that gives you some context for participating in these discussions. Like, if you relate them back to some problem you've encountered that you're working on, that just helps you learn a lot more than reading through something that maybe you can't really relate to. So the strategy in our classroom is a lot of project-based learning. Like, meet with the students. What is something you'd be excited to build? What kind of experience in VR do you think would be fulfilling to you to create? And then, okay, let's make a plan for understanding some of the parameters that you need to know to be able to do that. And let's get version 0.1 of that done.
We're at Unity. We're really focused on seeing what sorts of interactions are percolating and becoming new standards. Not necessarily defining them ourselves, but making sure that we're aware of them and can talk with the rest of the community about them. So we're going to come out with a design pattern library this summer as well, but not a best practices yet. I think it's really too soon for that. But that being said, I think if you try a bunch of different experiences, you can start to see over time what types of controllers feel good. When you have the radial menu, you know, on a Vive controller, how big does it have to be? So this sort of thing, I think, will sort of organically start to form and you know, become a standard over time.
Speaking of standards, I totally echo what Christian was saying. So one of the big problems, things are changing so rapidly right now. You know, the new versions of IDEs being released, new versions of hardware, stuff just gets broken all the time. So it's not as an educator, it's not the type of thing where you put together a piece of curriculum and that you're going to ride that for 2 or 3 years. 6 months later, it's probably going to be outdated, and you just have to be nimble, sort of just in time in terms of developing your approach.
There's a real upside though to that, and that's expertise. The people don't have a lot of expertise now. Like, we're sitting here on a panel. We've been doing this a couple years. So like, if this is something you're interested in, now is a great time to start developing that. Like, the technology's young, you can develop expertise really quickly. Like, this is a great time to start learning more about it.
And not only that, it's a great time to add things because, as Jay just mentioned, it's the beginning of it and we're missing so many parts. So if you enter in now, there is a lot that you can say and contribute than waiting until it will evolve and just building on the platform.
So what are the first steps to enter? As a non-technical person and as a technical person, what should I do tomorrow if I'm super jazzed up after leaving Rabbit Hole tonight? I'm like, AR, VR, this is the rest of my life. What's that first step I need to take as a technical role, non-technical role?
If you have a phone, if you download Unity tonight, you can have a cardboard app in like 3 hours. Like, not even 3 hours. So I would highly recommend you try it out.
Download Unity.
I'm a little biased.
Could use cardboard, yeah. No, I think the bar is actually very low, and the same goes. I mean, obviously for the other platforms too. Like when your HTC kit arrives, when you have an Oculus, it's actually, I mean, you hook it up to your PC, you use one of the game engine offering tools like Unity, and it's actually pretty fast.
I think the other point that's relevant is, I think what's one thing that's cool about developing in VR is there's there's a real need for relationship between designers and the software engineers who are programming functionality. If you don't have good design in your experiences in VR, then they're going to suck. So, I mean, there are a lot of assets that you can import and take advantage of, but if you really get to the point where you're developing a custom experience, the design element is critical. And so it really forces a dialogue between the designers and the software engineers, and designers are first-class citizens in VR at that level. I think that's really healthy and really cool, and probably not as much the case in some of the other mediums that things get developed in.
Yeah, I would add, if you're not technical and you're still interested in making something in VR or trying something out, if you have access to a Vive, just go in TiltBrush and start sketching out design. That's actually what I do, because it's a great prototyping tool for just quickly trying out different interfaces. So I know that's like, you have to have a Vive, you have to have, that first step. But if you do, and even if you're not an engineer, you can at least get a feel for what feels good, what size things need to be, and so on.
But even if you don't have a Vive, there are many innovation labs, I believe here at Stanford, but also in the city, that will give you access, and you can go to meetups and you can play with this thing, and you can prototype, and there are different hackathons and different mediums and tools to use. And I will also add that if you will download tonight the Unity app, augmented reality is also based on Unity, so after you will build your VR app, eventually you can port it also to AR, which is great.
So you talk about access, and yeah, we have a ton of access here in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have Stanford, we have these educational institutions building great organizations like this, Upload, Kaleidoscope, all the other meetups. But around the world, it's not as easy to get your hands on a Vive or get your hands on a Repel. It's not even easy right now here. So do you think these tethered PC-based platforms are the real future of VR, or do you think it's going to move more towards mobile? I see Vive as this very beautiful immersive experience, but not everybody has a few $1,000s in 10 by 10 space to put it in. So how do you lean on the PC versus mobile debate?
I mean, I think Vives and the Rift right now are the brick phones of VR. We're going to be like, wow, remember how heavy and terrible they used to be and how they were super expensive? And now we have tiny little ones in our pockets. I mean, my mobile phone is also a tiny little computer, right? So I think they're just going to converge. And hopefully the sooner the better, and the cheaper the better.
It's also a spectrum. You have computers today that are super expensive, and you will do some stuff with them, and you will have computers that you have like iPads. So it just depends what you need, and based on that and your needs, you will buy the product that you want to design with and create with.
I would say I don't think things are going to converge. I think there's going to be a bit of a bifurcation in that things like room scale VR are great, but I can't have it in my home. I live in San Francisco. I do not have space for that. I see that as something I'd go to an arcade or something like that to experience, like something immersive I'd go to a place to. I see what I'd have at home being closer to mobile or maybe PlayStation VR, something that's just much more contained.
So, I mean, for what it's worth, I hear you, but if you just have a track space, you can still have the standing VR experience, and it's just nice that you can go anywhere, even if you can only go in like a little,
Like pretty small spaces.
But
San Francisco roads, guys.
But don't you think also once positional tracking on mobile is figured out, that novelty kind of wears off and you don't have to have this big lighthouse system?
Well, at that point, I mean, that's the convergence, I guess, that I'm thinking of. Like, if the Vive becomes untethered, it's mobile as well, right? In the strictest sense. So.
I want to touch on AR more, because I know VR is hogging the panel here. How do people get started building AR content? Is it much different from VR, or is it pretty similar?
I just gave another kudos to Unity. Just download Unity, start based on Unity 2. I do think that you need to think differently when you build for AR and when you build for VR. It's a different space. I think that for AR, you need to take space as part of your experience. We at Meta, we do things based on like neural interface principles that are based on neuroscience, and a lot of the things we're doing is to try to build a platform that will be as simple as it can get and similar to the way that your brain is wired to think. And I think if you want to lead in AR, you need to take these things into consideration. and almost like ask yourself, what are the things that are inside of your monitors that are now in 2D, that if they will be in 3D, you will benefit out of it? What are the things that are right now you design in your computer that if they will be in space, you will do your work better, faster, more creative? Is it like architecture? Is it design? Is it from like we did a project with students from Stanford around medicine and simulation and different patients, virtual patients? Is it around education? Do you actually want to learn when you watch the TED Talk, or now you want that the TED Talk will turn to be something that is almost in 3D and part of it become object on your table? And once you start to think in that direction, you're starting to create an augmented reality.
I like the questions that you're posing to people. I think that's important. And I want to kind of ask the other panelists, what questions do you think people should ask themselves when beginning to develop a piece of VR or AR content? We see a lot of ports, right? Things that just, like, I'll take NextVR as an example. I want to be there at the game versus virtually live, which is taking a totally different approach, saying we're going to map the players and you could be on the field, which seems like a more VR-focused type of approach. But what are those questions that you ask yourself when starting to create a piece of VR, AR content?
To me, the very first question I ask almost everyone is like, who is your user? What is your product? Like, what do you actually want people to do? Like, it's not the goal of all of this is not to get people into VR headsets. I mean, it's cool. We're all like geeks and we like to build that stuff and we're very interested in this. But in the end, you have to think about like, who will use it for what? Like in this entire space, I think there's a bit too much emphasis on platform building. You should not build platforms, you should build products, and those become platforms, right? The original mobile phone was a great browser that always worked and was with you. Like, it had a value right there, and that's why you wanted to have it. You didn't want to have it because like a year later it'll have all these apps that you didn't have an idea like that even is possible. So it was a great product, and I think that's very important for VR as well, right? Because right now, obviously, like, there's a lot of excitement around the possibilities and the demos you see, and the kind of like you have a glimpse of all of these little things that could happen and will happen. But very important to think about the exact value add.
I just want also to add in that it's both for VR and AR. Try to think outside of desktop computing to volumetrics computing, because eventually this is what you're gonna create, and you're creating something that is part of your environment.
I would also argue that there's not much value in recreating something you can already do. I guess that's sort of an extension of your points, but I've definitely been in a lot of VR experiences where I was in like a kitchen, which is boring. It's fun, you know, in Job Simulator it's fun because there's a robot which does not exist in the real world kind of insulting you the whole time. That's fun. But that's a specific use case, right? I don't live in a low poly world, but I can enter one. So there's an advantage there. So there's this famous animator, Paul Kay, who always complained about people doing hyper-realistic animation in the medium. You can do anything you want. He loved like Ren and Stimpy, for example, because they could really, take a person and make them plasticine and extend it out. I think the same should be extended to VR and AR. Do things there that you can't do in the real world.
Yeah, you see this sometimes in VR movies, right? Sometimes you see this VR demo movie and you say, wow, that's so amazing. And then you realize that would be an amazing movie as well in regular 2D.
Yeah.
Because it's the entire storytelling, the art, and all of this, like this human connection is just done really, really, really well.
Yeah.
But you need to add this thing that only is possible in that medium. Like, they need to use it out, right?
I just want to chime in from another perspective, which is the audience right now is not that large. We've talked about it. The devices aren't in everybody's hands. So you might have great ideas, but it's just not practical right now because there isn't a population that has the devices that you can't reach them with your idea or something like this. I think there's room for, at this point, just experimenting with the medium and sort of developing a feel for it and a passion for it without investing a lot of time in a specific idea. Just let yourself sort of become part of the ecosystem, be a consumer, but also start to develop content. And then map some of the ideas you have as you go along to try to create something about, well, now I have this understanding, I can more intelligently, coherently think about building something for a specific audience. I would be less rigorous about having to have all that nailed down before you dove in and experimented with the ecosystem, because it's so immature right now.
The other thing I'd add kind of about the real world stuff is making sure things feel kind of natural. Like, you can do incredible things in it, but don't copy and paste a menu. Like, you don't have menus in real life. Like, the way people think about interacting with the world, they say, like, well, what if you bring up a menu by picking an object up? What if it's something that's actually a little bit more akin to a natural gesture? Thinking through things a little bit, because those paradigms aren't set, instead of just copying and pasting stuff you see on mobile or you see on desktop, I think will be really important.
So this will be my last question, then I want to have the audience, if you guys have some questions, we'll answer a few. But let's assume it's some years down the road, and we have input figured out, and there's standardization across headsets, and content's really starting to get built. What form of VR, AR content do you think is really going to attract a mainstream audience to the platform?
I think open sandbox worlds are going to be it. I mean, they will be it for me, I think. Not just games, but really just having Middle Earth in virtual reality, being able to go hang out with dragons and elves, and then, all right, I'm a little biased. I also like spaceships, but, just right now people spend so many man hours in Minecraft because they get to create their own worlds. And I think one of the most intoxicating things about virtual reality is that it is a world that is made in human minds that can fix the problems of the natural world. That sounds weird to say. For example, in VR, you can not have gravity and you can just kind of put things wherever you want and they don't fall down. And in VR, this feels great. This is something you've never experienced in real life. And yet in virtual reality, it feels amazing. And you're like, great, now this, memo is just going to stay here in space. Awesome. These are the kind of things I'm talking about. This is the sort of creating the world that we sort of wish the real world was more like. So I think having these, being able to create these amazing worlds is going to be big.
Touching on Timothy's earlier point about TiltBrush and prototyping, I think the evolution of TiltBrush, which I think they're thinking about it too, around prototyping and designing, taking the tool not only to the drawing world, but like literally showing different kind of ideas and then share it, and the ability to make VR more social. And another great app that I tried is La Ferie, that is a dancing experience. So things that are related to movement. I was a dancer for many years, so for me it's more personal. But I think those are the things that you will see as we're moving forward.
Anything else?
I'd just add social. Again, like, I think a big distinguishing factor is when you can not only explore a world, but you can do it with somebody else.
Or build with somebody else.
Yeah, I think when you do these things on your own, it's impactful, it matters, but like it changes everything when you can do it with someone else.
I didn't even occurred to me that you would be one.
Anybody else before we open up to audience? You don't have the killer app idea in the back of your head, or are you just not sharing it with us?
No, totally agree. I think it's
Stanford.
yeah, exactly. Of all places.
Of all places around the world, like.
A creation collaboration, totally. I totally agree. Like, this is so huge that you can build a reality and you can experience it with others and create it with others. Like, that's just as a general theme, that's very inspiring and would just like totally exist. It'd be great.
So you can build your world in Unity, port it to Sansar.
No, you're in VR making the world. That's what you can.
And then invite all your friends, view it on your cardboard as you pass it around. Right, yeah, I think world building is gonna be huge as well. I think that's once that's beautiful and easy, it's gonna be addicting. Who has questions? Mr. Front Row.
Tim Merrill from iTouch Reality. I'm also running a column for TechCrunch on AR and VR. The next one's going to be on survival. So how do you think folks will make money in the next 18 to 24 months as the market scales?
Be cheap. Like you need to have your costs under control. Is that what you're asking? Like,
I'm asking on the revenue side, not the cost side.
yeah, that is kind of related, right? It's like if survival is kind of the balance of the two, right? So it's super important to. That goes back to the market question. Like your market will just not be insanely large. Like it's just the nature of things. So I think if you're scrappy and you know what you're doing and you keep like your costs under control, I think you can do great things and you'll definitely do way better than just surviving. But you can't imagine like I mean you can't expect to build like $700 million kind of like pieces of content and recover that in the next 1 year.
Another suggestion from a different angle is look for kind of outdated industries. So create a content for things like the New York Times did, and there are a lot of different industries that right now are trying to enter VR and AR, finding their pain point and creating a product for these industries can be really relevant.
Just add it, if we're not in a get-rich-quick era. Like, we're not in a place where, like, you should join VR if you want to make $1 million tomorrow. We're not there. I think we'll get there, but I think we're just in an earlier stage. So I think it's just going to take some time, and I think a lot of the companies that are in it and building great, both quality products and building for the long haul will get there.
Yeah, thanks. So for all your guys' experiences, when it comes to AR, VR, and the topic is storytelling, who do you think's leading the way in that? Will we say Silicon Valley or will we say Hollywood?
I think none of them right now. The storytelling that I'm seeing in VR, AR, not yet there, but is taking movies and taking experiences, exactly as you said, in 2D, that now we're seeing it in 3D, but you're not necessarily seeing another layer that explaining why you will use a headset and not just watch it on your TV. There is a lot of room to create a more immersive experience.
I actually think what's super awesome about VR right now, and then also the storytelling aspect, that this is like really where all of that comes together. That's back to Jay's point. Like, you need Silicon Valley and you need Hollywood and you need designers and you need engineers. Mm-hmm. Like, it needs to be performant, otherwise it's not good. It needs to be well designed, otherwise it's not good. Like, this is a medium where everything has to come together, and that's why also there is a lot of cross collaboration, right?
Yeah, I don't really know of any major VR players or VR like storytelling players that don't have offices in both cities right now, which is funny, or at least like significant ties.
I'll add, because I just went to a bunch of different countries to explore that exact question, and the interesting thing is there's not a lot of Hollywood IP out there that's being turned into VR content. There's some tie-ins to movies and things, but not a lot in terms of how much there is in Hollywood. And in every country that I went, France was honestly had some of the most incredible creators out of anywhere that I went, and even here. Interspace, who made La Paris, they're incredible.
Awesome, yeah.
But I don't think it's a Silicon Valley versus Hollywood thing. I think it's a good point that you need the balance of the skill sets that come from Silicon Valley and Hollywood, but VR meets in the middle, because there is this element of not just real life capture with 360, there's also the CG element and the interactivity that needs to be built in. But again, that goes back to the tools. Don't have a lot of tools to make that incredibly easy and accessible for everybody to jump in.
One point on storytelling, though, is just if we look back at the introduction of the television, what were the first shows? Does anybody remember the first shows on television? They're basically just a bunch of people sitting around doing a radio show, and you're just showing a picture of them talking. When I think about the connection with Hollywood, I think a lot of what people are using the medium for right now is the equivalent. They're taking this new exciting medium like the TV was back then, and they're taking what they know how to do in two-dimensional film storytelling, and they're sticking it in this medium. And it is cool. It's new. It's this new medium. It's awesome. But I think much as we will look at the hardware that we have of today as bricks in the future, and we can't believe we dealt with that, I think we will look back at the storytelling experiences now and be like, man, that was really arcane. It was just really not taking advantage of the medium. So I think people are just sort of dipping their toe in the pool of going beyond the traditional storytelling.
A couple more questions. Glasses?
Oh, okay. So,
no, actually the woman in the glasses. Okay.
Lady first.
Well, it was related to what you were talking about. I actually come from storytelling background, and from the film perspective, and originally from the independent film perspective, and there's a lot of interesting things happening in independent film related to VR, and I think that's the only place it's really happening. And partially because of what you were talking about, it's an experimental medium right now, and indie makers can, in a sense, afford to experiment, and there is no, he was asking about what's the revenue, what's the cost? It's just make do. They're always a low barrier of cost and entry, and money is never the deciding factor anytime for an indie filmmaker. So, and you have a very good documentary film program here. I suggest, because you all talk about collaboration, and every time I see even the program that Facebook just Oculus launched last week for education, is a STEM program where they're pairing filmmakers with students, and they're pairing filmmakers with nonprofits to make content, VR content, just launched.
Oh yeah.
But that's not a STEM program, it's a STEAM program, because you're taking artists and matching them with science, technology, engineering. And I think that's missing in the conversation in terms of storytelling and content, is working with the storytellers, everybody collaborating together. So I just suggest people to find those people as well and add them to your team.
And you know, the storytelling side of things, it's much more collaborative than the technology side of things.
Well
Technology
said.
side of things, nobody wants to share anything.
Yeah.
Everybody's keeping their IP close to their chest. But storytelling, it's open kimono. Everybody is really open to sharing their learnings and making content better for everybody. Yeah. How about this side? Sorry to be,
I might go for the last question.
Last question? This guy.
Okay, this is kind of.
But you got to write an article.
Alright. So my question is about kind of democratizing funding and actual kind of team structures, like organizational democratization within VR, or creating VR. So how do we go about, like as an industry, kind of the way that we form our teams, and the way we fund our teams is going to determine how the entire industry gets formed. How do we kind of go about doing that? Or do you think that is a good approach?
Do you mean like we should be rethinking like 2 back end, 1 front end, and a designer type, or like what do you?
So I mean, I guess the question is more around like, should there be funds that are funding a lot of smaller teams, or should it be like larger scale teams, and like kind of how do you see that funding model maybe changing for VR, or maybe staying the same? Basically trying to make it so that there's more ideas per like capital investment rather than like a couple ideas that kind of don't.
I think what's super critical no matter what is invest in experimentation. Like that's what we did very, very early on like Google VR and on the Daydream team. We had this Daydream Labs team, like completely set aside, and like you build like crazy stuff all the time. That's your job. If you just build crazy stuff, then you've done it really well. Because many approach it as like we need a product manager, we need a designer, we need an engineer, and then basically we make a plan and then we do it. And that just like that structure just doesn't work. Like that works when you have the idea and you want to execute, but you need to invest in like this free play. And I think it doesn't matter on what scale, whether it's an independent or a big company.
It does seem like you can tell in VR pretty quickly if it's working, right? If you're in a really good experience. I mean, La Prix is one of the best out there, and it's
totally.
5-8 minutes long tops, right? But you're like, cool, nailed it. Continue with your good work, right?
And it's kind of a new medium, so go and explore.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of.
Yeah, at this point, it's not worth it investing in a 1,000-hour-long game if the mechanics are all wrong.
And another thing, think about that's actually a great example. It's a small team that just did one thing well.
Yeah.
I think what we see a lot in VR right now is it's not really there yet, or it's like many different things, and there is a place to take things and make it really well, and then you see the TiltBrush and the La Prairie of the VR world.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Everybody, round of applause.